I'm live. Hello. My child is at school for her first day of school, and I have to occupy myself. And so I'm sitting here watching videos. There's an excellent Sadhguru is, I believe, how you pronounce it, but I could be wrong. SADHGURU. Anyway, he has excellent videos. But today I'm sitting here and I wanted to put to use this Bible that my mother and father gave me for Christmas. And I have read the Bible. I've read the Bible. I've memorized much of the Bible because that was part of my education as a child. And and as I've grown up, I've seen a lot of the flaws in the interpretation. And I think just because the English language is so expansive, I guess is the word, it's so difficult to get an actual accurate translation of the Bible unless you go back to the language that it's written in and have someone who speaks that language explain and translate as to what they are saying, because the structure of the sentences, all of that, I don't think any of that. I mean, I'm sure at one point in time, or in some places or some people, they do take that into account. But I think a lot of Christian religions and a lot of religions that do utilize the Bible, translation is lost in personal translation. Yes, because one person you're in one place in America and you say something and it means one thing. You can go to another place in America and say the exact same thing and it means something completely different. So I honestly, truly believe that's something that's happening with the Bible. I just wanted to share today my understanding of what the Bible is. Now, to me, I don't see it as like most people see it as the book of life, the guide to life, the standards of living, etc. I do believe it does have a lot of good morals, a lot of good examples of how we should live life, a lot of good examples as to how we shouldn't live life, what we should and shouldn't do to other people. I don't think the Bible glorifies Christ's crucifixion. I think a lot of people's translations of Christ's crucifixion and their interpretation of the actual purpose of the event and their actual use of that event now, I think that is grossly glorified. And I think that is that's my biggest problem with Christianity, is they glorify Christ's death as being acceptable because he did it for our sins. He did it to cleanse us, to wash us white as snow, to all that other stuff. And forgive me if I'm wrong, and maybe it's just my perception and understanding of it, but from what I've heard growing up, from what I was taught as a child, and my mother grew up Lutheran, I believe. I grew up Baptist, Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran. We were all kinds of everything. I guess mostly Baptist, but I do believe that the first book, Genesis, when it speaks of creation, I do believe human beings have been here forever. In my mind, everyone taught me growing up that God always existed, because I would ask, well, where did God come from and how did he come into existence? Well, he's always been there. So to me, if that's possible, and I've never seen God, I've never seen proof of God. Okay, hypothetically speaking, people give examples all the time of how God proves his existence, but there's no solid proof for me that God exists. Now, there's proof that energy exists, there's proof that we exist, there's proof that animals exist. If it's so easy for people to cling to the idea that God has always been there, he's just an unseen force that we cannot see, will not see until we pass away, etc., yada, yada, then why is it so far-fetched for us to believe that we have always been in existence and that the God they are referring to in the Bible is not necessarily a person, place, or thing, but the concept of God? And in that time, I think it is very possible that God or Lord or King or father is what they were referring to. Parents, human beings. We were made in the image of God. We have God's likeness. We look and resemble our parents. There are so many possibilities and translations. If any number of people sit there and read the book of Genesis and decide what Genesis means and what it's actually referring to, if it's actually referring to literally creation of that's creation of beings and plants and trees and oceans and earth. I can look at it, and what I gain from that is that one day there was someone that decided to sit down and record all of existence, and therefore they created, they didn't create, but they acknowledged the existence of everything, gave everything names, gave everything an identity. That's honestly, truly what I believe the book of Genesis is about, the first part of Genesis. And I think man was made in his image. Okay, the whole woman's rib and all this other stuff, or man's rib and all this other stuff. If you look at any religion, if you look at any spiritual belief, if you look at any of the Greek mythology, see, that's what's crazy, is because what's mythology? A myth is, let's see what Siri says a myth is. Siri, what is a myth?
Here's some information.
Myth is a folklore genre consisting of narratives or stories that play a fundamental role in a society, such as foundational tales or origin myths. The main characters in myths are usually gods, demigods, or supernatural humans. Stories of everyday human beings, although often of leaders of some type, are usually contained in legends as opposed to myths. Okay, let's see. Siri, define myth. Siri, define myth.
A traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events.
Ooh. Continue. It says a misrepresentation of the truth, a widely held but false belief or idea. Who gives anyone the right to say the Greeks' idea of creation is a widely held but false belief or idea, or a misrepresentation of the truth, or a fictitious or imaginary person or thing? Who are we to decide anybody's God is a myth? So that's what upsets me, is that certain religions and certain spiritual beliefs or whatever, they decide that everyone else, like pagans, for instance, are anyone that don't believe in the Christian God, and therefore their gods are false gods. I believe Christianity is a polytheistic religion. It is not a one God religion. It's polytheistic because you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Then they disguise it because they disguise that as the 3 in 1 to make it seem like there's only one true God, and that it's very manipulative. It's very deceptive. It's very hypocritical. And I hate to be so critical of Christianity, but I'm not very fond of any religion at all. I want people to come together and understand themselves and their existence. Because here's what happens in my mind. My son commits suicide, and my father commits suicide. I've attempted suicide a numerous amount of times, over 10 times. And so I have the right to speak about this. I have the right, because I do have an understanding of what pushes someone to the point where they're willing to take their own life. We are led to believe that there is something so much more glorious, so much more perfect, so much more happy and less stressful, and there's no hurt, no pain, no nothing after we die. And I think that is the worst false interpretation of our purpose, because it's the worst false representation of it. Because there has to be, in order for a person's mind, because it's human beings, we're naturally curious, we want to get up and do things. Okay, I mean, unless you have some severe mental illness that inhibits you from doing that, like social anxiety, things like that, or you've developed a fear of a lot of things that keep you from living life, that's a miserable existence. And I can say for myself that is really a miserable existence, because I've been at the severe end of that spectrum and at the slightly existent end of the spectrum. Like, I've been both extremes, and it goes from a level of just uncomfortable and mildly inconvenient to life changing, life halting, life debilitating, like, really. Anyways, so when someone gets to the point where a mere hypothesis or a possibility that life is going to be better after you die, just the statement itself confuses me. Like, life is going to be better after I'm dead. No. Because we sit here in this life and allow ourselves to go through so much misery, allow ourselves to struggle beyond what we should have to, but keeping in our mind this hope. Okay, well, it's going to be worth it when I die. It's going to be worth it. All these riches and this, and then roads paved with gold and all of this in heaven, and God's going to be there to greet me and blah, 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 blah. No. We are making a huge mistake when we do this, because we make death so freaking, yeah. When you look at life these days and how much the majority of us struggle, and I'm not saying the select few, the majority of us struggle beyond what is even necessary. And when we make death so appealing, that's only going to make your suicide numbers rise. Now, when you get the understanding that this is the only life you have, this life is meant to enjoy and love and live and better yourself, encourage others to better themselves, to enjoy our existence before it's too late. But instead, we allow religion to teach us, to convince us that we should just, okay, maintain a certain level of composure, maintain a certain box that you have to stay within, just so you can survive long enough to die and then be happy for eternity in heaven. We're selling ourselves short. We're denying ourselves the right. We're denying ourselves the ability and the conscious, because it's our mindset that it's going to be better once we're with God, or with Christ. Well, yeah, because it's going to be no more anything. I don't know for sure what happens when you die, but in my opinion, okay, your energy might remain. But in order for your energy to communicate, for your energy to accomplish or interact or any of that, I mean, okay, there's mediums and there's psychics, and I do believe in those things. Mediums are actually what I would be referring to at this point that would be appropriate for the conversation. Mediums you can speak with people that have passed on. That's because your mind, they're utilizing your mind and your understanding. Okay, not your, but people that are mediums and have that gift. Energy is utilizing their brain matter and their thought process, in my understanding, to communicate with that person in a way that they can understand. But not everybody can do that. So once you've passed on and you're only spirit or only energy, and you no longer have a body, a vessel to communicate with, then that's it. You're stuck waiting for energy in everyone else's bodies to become debilitated to the point that your energy is debilitated by death, and you're only able to communicate with the people that can gain or communicate with you, that you can communicate with in their understanding, that have the ability, that have their brain or whatever developed to that point, their consciousness developed to that point where they can communicate with you. Now, it doesn't seem like to me we should sit here and waste our ability to communicate with each other, our ability to grow, our ability to actually be a physical being, our ability to actually physically do things and to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. We take life so for granted. And And someone somewhere down the line used this book and Jesus Christ's suffering. And I think the intention of recording Jesus Christ's crucifixion in history, the reason, the purpose was so that we could wash away our own sins and not do the same thing to other people. That's not how it's being utilized. It's being utilized as a means to say, come join this religion, be washed white as snow. Christ died for your sins. No. That's not what is supposed to happen there. Because people are still doing to other people what was being done to Christ. Religions themselves are doing to other people what was done to Christ. When they don't understand, they don't accept, they don't encourage and invite or they just don't accept people. A lot of them claim to be, but once you get there, they want you to change, to be like them, it's so frustrating because I've come to a point in my life where I don't want to fit in to what anyone else sees for me. I don't want to be what anyone else wants me to be. I want to be me. When I look in the mirror, okay, my hair is fake. Right now, and I love it. I love it. I've wanted this kind of style my whole life. If I could have done it with my own hair, that would have been great. But unfortunately, I went through a psychotic break while I was being abused in California and ended up shaving my head. But it gave me opportunity. That negative event has given me opportunity to have a hairstyle I've always wanted. Like, believe it or not many people realize that about me, but I have a very different sense of style than most people think I do, because I've always stayed within the realms, within that box that everyone set for me, because I wanted acceptance. I wanted to be a part of something, of someone, of someone's life, of someone's family, of whatever. But we need to accept, as long as what we're doing to ourselves and to other people is not hurting anyone. That needs to be the only limits that we set for ourselves, because we set ourselves so many limits that we don't experience life. We don't experience each other. We separate ourselves from people that could be beautiful, wonderful people, and we sell ourselves short by not even interacting with them because they have one or two tiny little traits that are outside our box of acceptability. It's just ridiculous. We need to be able to sit down and but assess, I guess the same thing. Assess, is that what that person's doing that I don't like so much? Is what they're doing hurting anyone? And that needs to be the only thing that causes us to separate ourselves from anyone's behaviors, and not from that person, but that behavior. Like, you can still, someone can have a certain behavior. Say, I do this and that during the day, and then when I'm home, I'm doing this and that and the other. Well, if I go outside of my home and I do things that someone doesn't agree with, they don't have to go with me and do them. Now, if it's hurting another person and they're able to determine that, I think they're obligated to say, hey, this seems like it's a destructive or hurtful behavior towards another person. I think we're obligated to keep each other accountable. I think we're obligated to do that. But when it comes a matter of opinion, like, oh, that's not right, or oh, I don't like the way that looks, or oh, I don't like the way that, yeah. And when it comes to beliefs and spirituality and what happened in the past, happened so that we could look back and have 20/20 hindsight. Hindsight's always 20/20. Well, not always. Even then, it's not 20/20 because nobody's utilizing it correctly. Anyhow, hindsight's supposed to be 20/20 because you can look back and see, okay, well, this is what I did wrong, and this is what I should have done, and this is what I could have done, and maybe not even this is what I should have done, because there's never really set in stone a 100% only one way to do things right. Like, there could be a plethora of better decisions and all of them acceptable. Like, that reminds me of the test that I had to take in California for KDAC when I completed my alcohol and other drug counseling studies. Their test was very different from other tests. Like, it's multiple choice, but more than one answer is correct. So you have to sit there and determine, because based on what you learn in school, they're all almost all of them will be correct answers. And you have to determine which one is the best course of action, like which one will address the client's needs and respect the other client's needs and prevent any transference, countertransference. If there's any number of situations in a counseling setting, and an addiction counseling setting, I don't want to say even more so, because addiction counseling, I don't believe it should be or it is any different than any other counseling, because it's not necessarily drugs are not the only form of medication. Like, they're not the only form of self-medication. Families becoming codependent, families becoming, and we're going way off track here, but families becoming enabling and things like that. Workaholics, gambleaholics, drug addicts, drama addicts. I mean, you don't even have to have drugs and alcohol in your life for you to be an addict. Like, seriously. But we all feel the same. We all have the same mechanism. We all have the same feelings. But the problem here lies, we don't all express them the same way. There's no consistency anymore in expression. And unless you get down and dirty and know each other, you don't really learn an accurate perception or interpretation of other people's expressions. And I think by families and kids being in school all day and families being in work all day, and it's not like it used to be when kids would, I feel like kids are in school far too long and parents are required to work far too much. And I think when a mother decides that she's going to have children, I think at that point she needs to decide that's going to be her job. Because I do believe a lot of the mental health issues in the United States and anywhere else are caused because mothers are going to work far too soon. And those are the vital years of our children's lives. That is when bonding and attachment and healthy relationships are based on your bonding and relationships with your mother. I think we minimize the importance of that bond. And I think we enable women to disrupt or disturb the neurological development and the sociological development of their children by leaving them with other people too soon and too often. So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to share that the Bible. I do believe the Bible is about it. The Bible is referring to human beings that were in existence, not any supernatural beings, not any. I think it was just their way of recording at that time, or whoever's way of recording at that time. I know the Bible's written by several people. If I'm not mistaken. I guess everyone could be, someone was taught something else. Anyhow, the Bible was written by whoever the Bible was written by, and it was their way of recording history. It's like a history book, but it doesn't mean that that person's interpretation of why God existed, who God was, and all these other things was actually a supernatural being. There's no way for us to know that they weren't just referring to a king or a queen or a lord. Or my interpretation of the Garden of Eden is quite different from other people's, and it's based on the story plus what we know now as human beings and what we've learned through science and biology, the possibilities that could explain the snake speaking to the woman giving the man. I mean, the man and woman being in the garden, then being cast out of the garden. It wasn't a matter of a supernatural God. It was a matter of someone that was in the position of being king or lord or pharaoh or whatever, and then they were allowed to live in the Garden of Eden, and they were only to eat the fruit off of the ground, not of the tree, which would be the fermented and rotting fruit. Well, fermented and rotting fruit, when also mixed with yeast, will actually create acid. I know that because I went to jail. Juvenile detention is where I learned that. Yeah, bread and orange peels and something else. I don't know, growing black mold and all this. Not black mold, but yeah, I guess it would be black mold, but whatever. A form of acid. PCP, I don't freaking care to know the details, but fermented fruit causes drunkenness, alcohol, hallucination, delusions, comorbidity is not the word I'm looking for, definitely not the word I'm looking for, but incoherency, just from being intoxicated. And then they got intoxicated and ate from the tree where they were not supposed to, because it was the tree, the garden of someone. It was someone else's garden, someone else's tree. They were being allowed to be there. They were there, whatever. That's my interpretation. And that's not even a very good one at this point. It's kind of difficult for me to sit down without actually having the story in front of me, because my mind just doesn't focus on one thing that well unless I sit down and write it first. But anyways, and it's a very valid interpretation that they were at the mercy of a Lord, actually a human being, not a supernatural God. And then they were cast out of that garden to make their own because they couldn't respect that the fruit in the trees was his, the fruit in the center of the garden and all that other extra stuff. I don't know, whatever. Needless to say, we weren't there. So it really is irrelevant. It really is irrelevant. And though it may hold a certain moral to the story, which I can't actually pinpoint right at this moment, I probably could go without having to decipher who's who and what's what, and just understanding a moral to the story, which is, I think, how the Bible should be interpreted. Interpreted? I believe the whole Bible should be interpreted in a manner that only focuses on the moral of the story. Determining who existed, who didn't exist, how they exist, what physical being or celestial being, state of being, or whatever they might be is irrelevant. It's the moral of the story. It's the lesson we can learn that becomes universal, and the universal connection. Because when we all start deciding who's who and what's what and when they existed, how they existed, why they existed, everybody's going to be different, and it's never going to be universal. It's going to continue to separate and segregate us. And when we use that as, oh, you have to believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins, that is another way of forcing opinion and brainwashing and all that other stuff. That is not the moral of that story. The moral of that story is that Jesus Christ was a good man with gifts that he used for good. He used them not to judge people, not to criticize people, not to hurt people, but he himself, even though he was a good man doing good deeds, was murdered. And I do believe that he was the son of God, a man that lived, I think it was from the north. If you read the Bible entirely, you'll understand what I'm talking about. From the north, the light of the whatever, and then I can't think of exact words right now, but no one could come to my Father, no one can come to my Father but by me. And that's why Jesus Christ was murdered, because he was protecting his Father. And he and his Father, in my opinion, my interpretation, could have been, and this is a good way to look at it, because this way we're not all trying to figure out and decide who's right and who's wrong. He was protecting his Father, and he was murdered. They were both good people, good men doing good deeds with gifts, whatever, whatnot. Maybe we could leave the whole Father out of it and just take Jesus Christ alone. A good man doing good deeds, murdered for no reason. For no reason. What did he do to anybody? He didn't do anything. From my understanding, he gave life where there was no life anymore. He produced food when there was none. He produced water when there wine. That's another thing. That's another one of my biggest, that's like the biggest contradiction. Why would he turn water into wine? When water is the substance of life itself. Water is the most needed substance. Why would he turn water into wine? He taught them to make wine. He turned water into wine. He turned one fish into many fish, one loaf into many loaves. He taught them, maybe, how to do all these things, how to multiply them. I don't believe the author was elaborate enough. I don't believe the author elaborated enough. The authors were descriptive enough. And I think that left room. Or maybe down the line, someone just decided to make it sound that way. I don't know. Any number of things. Just like one nation under God, it's a government of democracy. We are not one nation under God because, first of all, God and state and government is all separate. It's not allowed because it's not a universal idea. Christianity, religion, there is no universal religion other than being a spiritual person and understanding that we are all different and respecting all religious choices and personal choices as long as they don't hurt each other. There's no way the United States can be under God, because which God are we under? Church is separate from state. And that means all the United States. If they are united, California just needs to go. We need to just cut California off the United States because they do what they want anyways, irregardless of their own laws. They don't follow them. It's all who you know and who you blow out there. Anyways, sorry, that was inappropriate, but I'm just saying from my experience. See what I mean? Everybody's interpretation and perceptions are going to be different. Let me write a Bible or a history book based on my experiences, and it will be a flipping behind load full of BS if you ask anyone else. And it'll be God's honest truth and 100% wisdom if you ask me. You got to take what's worth it out of these and not use them to control people, not use them to force your opinion or your perceptions on other people. And we all have to take another thing into account. When we say and do things, just because they were normal behavior in our family or normal behavior as we were growing up, or as adults, we've learned certain behaviors that are normal behaviors for us. If we approach another human being and we do something or say something that they find offensive or hurtful, unless we are able to communicate those things, no one's going to get anywhere. So if that person says to you, first of all, most people can't sit there and say, hey, whoa, that was hurtful, without being either complete assholes or just not saying anything at all. That's the first hurdle. The second hurdle, how we got to this, I don't know. The second hurdle is that when someone does voice that, hey, what you just said is hurtful to me, the other person's supposed to say, okay, I'm sorry you felt that way. This is what I actually intended. What did I do or say, or how did I say it that made you believe that? That way they can be aware of themselves. That way they can be aware of their behaviors, not to bow down and do it the other person's way, but to understand that person's perceptions of their behaviors. And see, people who are Aspies or autistic, that's one thing about us, is we actually memorize. We are different people around every person we know. Not because we're fake, not because we're pretenders, but because we adjust our behavior according to them. We adjust not only to make ourselves comfortable, but to ensure that they are comfortable around us, because we tend to be very annoying people to most people when we are just ourselves. And I speak for myself as an Aspie. I even annoy the shit out of myself sometimes because people have taught me growing up that my behaviors are inappropriate or annoying or just not normal. And so I'm like, oh God, Amber, stop it. What's wrong with you? Nothing. Keep doing it. Nobody's even here to bother. Why am I correcting myself all the time? Ridiculous. Needless to say, we have to express to each other when we're hurt by something someone said and why it was hurtful, so that they can go and assess themselves and say, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I should change that behavior. Or they can say, that's not what I was trying to say. This is what I was trying to say, and find more, not better ways to express, but additional ways to express, because everybody's going to perceive differently. Everyone's going to accept different cues. Everyone's going to accept or expect different expressions. And we have to be sensitive to everyone's. It's not the message that you're sending or how you're sending it. It's how it's perceived. Effective communication. Neither of us are going to know unless we go back and forth. We have to go back and forth. You can't just stop one after they've done, nope, that hurt me, leave me alone, shut up. You don't even know if that's for sure, if your perception is correct. Look at everything we put ourselves and our children through and our families through, and understand that not one of us has a correct understanding of how to communicate effectively. Well, I can't say not one of us. I'm sure there's somebody out there. There's some freak of nature that can effectively communicate. Sorry to say it that way, but I mean, really, that's how I feel. Anyways, yeah, from the Bible to effective communication. There's a lot of good stuff I have to share with people. I'm not conceited, but I am a very confident and amazing woman. And I know I am, because I've been through a lot, and I have a lot of understanding and acceptance for people and their differences. I don't like to call them disorders or disabilities. They're differences. Like, seriously. We need to get over this, because the more we focus on how someone's difference can be disabling, the less we focus on the abilities they have. And I think we need to focus on ability rather than disability. And that way we can all thrive and we can all strive to be better. not better, but more functional and more effective. Yeah, I think our planet is in a crisis, and I'm one tiny person with a lot to say. And I've been disabled for the past 14 years, especially when it comes to expressing myself and my opinions and points of views. And they have been grossly misinterpreted and spread throughout certain places, not Arizona, well, maybe, but never actually been brought back to me for confirmation of the distorted truth they received, which makes it not the truth. Needless to say, you know what I'm saying. I hope. There's one watcher. The watcher in the Anyways, that's all I really got to share for now. I guess I came on here and kept myself from getting anxious and going batshit crazy. Excuse the expression. But okay, yeah, that too. I will cuss a lot. I do cuss a lot, but you won't hear me verbally abuse people. You may on occasion hear me verbally abuse a man named Jeffrey Martin Miller, and I will at all costs, I will try my best to steer clear of that. But I do hold a lot of resentment towards that person. And I don't think it's acceptable. I think once you're to the point where you hate someone or you hold enough resentment that you are verbally, emotionally, or physically abusive, that you need to separate yourself from them and anything that has to do with them at all costs until you're able to heal that. And that includes discussing them. And if there is no resolution, then it should be left at that. That person should not exist to you unless you can be appropriate and set a decent example of how to gain resolution in a situation like that, which I cannot do. So that being said, no more talk about that person. But if I do become verbally abusive towards that person, that is why. Please feel free to correct me. Please feel free to DM me, live chat me. I don't care, whatever. Hey, yo, no need for all that. You're a better person than that, because I know I am. I'm really not abusive to anyone. I don't condone any abuse in any way, shape, or form. And I do accept, even for my daughter, I accept her criticism as well. I told her, if mommy does something, call me out. Do it respectfully, but call me out. Hey, that's abusive. Or hey, that's hurtful. Or hey, that's destructive. She has every right to do that. We're both learning from each other. Needless to say, I got to go now. I've distracted myself enough to keep me from going crazy. She is at school. I'm so excited for her. And at the same time, I'm terrified. Hopefully with time, this anxiety will go away. When I keep myself distracted, I seem to be just fine, obviously, as you can see. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'm going to have to wash dishes and clean the house now. I think with time, it will get easier. And once I'm able to navigate my fears and get my butt into the courthouse out here, or speak to a representative out here, like the district attorney, or maybe the attorney general out here. Is that who would be next? Once I'm able to navigate my fears and do that out here, I'm still very apprehensive. I'm still very, what's the word? Is it apprehensive? I'm still very apprehensive to speak with law enforcement. I'm still very apprehensive to speak with any representatives, the DA, the judges. I'm very apprehensive. No one really has sat down and understood that just because there were court orders in my case, none of them were lawful. And everyone said it was like, okay, well, they wouldn't have made orders unless, or well, how did he ever get? That's what I'm saying. It was never anything that should have happened. And rather than seeing it as that, people are always like, oh, well, you have to do this. And you have to, basically telling me I have to continue to allow them to violate my rights. No, I won't accept that. I won't accept that. So I just avoid law enforcement at all costs. I avoid judges and attorneys and representatives at all costs. And it's because I have that fear that as soon as I go speak to them, they're going to be like, okay, where's your daughter? And they're going to take her away. And I'm petrified of that. I'm an excellent mom. I'm a good mom. I've been through a buttload of crap, like any number of almost everybody out there. And we all have our limits and our thresholds, and some of us do better than others. But I think I've done amazingly well for myself, considering what I've been through. And I don't want them to destroy that. So I am scared. I am terrified in that situation. Boy, we just went everywhere in this one. All right. I got some stuff to do. I really didn't get to any one specific point today, but next time I will draw out an outline and I will have an actual lesson to share, or not teach, but well, yeah, teach. I'll actually have some insight to share or give or whatever on an actual topic, and I'll make an outline so I can follow it. Otherwise, we will be everywhere and anywhere. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Like, share, subscribe, or don't. It's up to you.